Welcome to the Roots Podcast. As always, I am your host, Sean Pitcher. Today we have on Rachel Voet. Hopefully I said that correctly. I checked before we went on. She is the nutrition, education, allergen specialist, sports dietitian at the University of Nebraska. She was most recently spending a majority of her career at Iowa State, specifically as the director of football nutrition. I'm really excited to have her on. There's lots of awesome stuff happening at Nebraska. She has a new and different role from what I've seen in the past before that we're going to definitely jump into and talk a lot more about. But Rachel, welcome.
Thank you, Sean. Super excited to be here and chat with you today.
Terrific. So as we start with every single podcast, could you tell us what is your roots? Who is Rachel?
Yeah, sure. So I guess to start, I am originally born and raised in Omaha, Nebraska. So pretty much smack middle of the country. I grew up super active. I have one younger brother, a lot of cousins. I just grew up a big football fan. I played pretty much every sport I could. So soccer, volleyball, softball, basketball. Um, I went to an all-girls high school, and so unfortunately no football or anything there for me. But I guess I had surgery in high school after a little bit of an injury from sports. So to rehab from that, I kind of started running and really got interested in nutrition and how this kind of impacted my recovery and ability to get back into sport and volleyball. And I played defense. So diving to the ground after a hip surgery was not necessarily the most fun thing in the world. So I really kind of switched to distance running, cross country, and just kind of found a love for that. And I really did get interested like my senior year about what myself or my teammates weren't eating and how that impacted our performance. So when it came time for college, I decided, I wanted to kind of look into nutrition. I did not know what a dietitian was. I didn't know that was necessarily a thing, sadly. So that's kind of embarrassing to admit. But I just knew I was really interested in nutrition and then the exercise performance side of things as well. So I ended up going to Iowa State University. They had a 5-year dietetics and exercise program where you could get your bachelor's and master's. So this was 2011, 2012. So they kind of saved time by doing that 5-year thing and then do the internship. So ended up going to Iowa State. Really liked it. If you know anything about Ames, Iowa, it's a small college town. There's not necessarily too much to do. So the college athletics is a really big part of the culture there. They did not have a full-time sports dietitian, so I did not get any kind of experience when I was in college. So when it came time for the internship, I realized I wanted to go back and be closer to home. So I wanted to go back to Nebraska and did my research, found out that Nebraska had a very rich history with the performance nutrition department. They had the first full-time dietitian back in the 90s. So applied to that internship and got accepted. It was really great to be back home. Again, I grew up a Nebraska fan, and so it was kind of surreal to be back there. I got to work in the performance nutrition department my first fall of that internship. And then when I went and did my clinical work and my other community work, they kind of underwent a lot of staffing changes. The original dietitian ended up getting back rehired. So by the time I was done with my internship, it just kind of happened. Timing worked out. I reached out again to that new staff and asked for any kind of volunteer work experience that I could get. And they allowed me to come back into what would eventually be like a fellowship position, I guess. So as a young dietitian, just anything to get my foot into the door. So that was super fun timing. I was there for about 15 months or so, a little under a year and a half. Learned so much, acted like a sponge. Again, Iowa State posted a position for a football director of nutrition. So I did apply to that. I was applying to some other jobs before this position opened too. And when I saw that it was Iowa State and I just had an allegiance to that university after having gone there, I applied and was very fortunate to get that position. So worked there with football in their department for about 3.5 years, a little under 4 seasons until this position opened. So super excited to be back here in Nebraska and still in an athletic department and keeping my foot in this door here where a lot of exciting things are happening. So it's a new role. I'm excited to talk about it a little bit more.
Yeah, it's funny, a couple points there. Iowa State definitely was ahead of their time. The fact they already had a master's program back in like 2011 to 2013. I don't think a lot of people were doing that. So you definitely lucked out from that standpoint. You're probably super excited with Nebraska being so huge in volleyball. I know they had that huge volleyball game. It was like 90,000 people were at it, and it was in the stadium. And I'd never
Mhm.
seen anything like that before. And I've seen obviously a lot of female sports. I know volleyball is definitely on the rise as well. So it was obviously terrific exposure for them. I saw there was a volleyball professional league that's starting up. I was most previously in Atlanta. They were starting, I think it was like the Atlanta Vibe or something like that.
Mhm.
So I know volleyball is kind of creating that professional opportunity for individuals to go, besides just the, Olympic or US Olympic option. So it's
Yeah,
just
it's
great
super
that there's
cool.
just,
I think it's the Omaha Supernovas. So they are starting that in Omaha, which again, Omaha doesn't have any like professional sport teams. So I never really thought that I'd be back in Nebraska like working with it, but volleyball is huge here as evidenced by Nebraska's rich volleyball tradition. So that was like I think it was within the first month and a half of coming back here. So it was good timing to be able to experience volleyball day. That was really, really cool.
it's nice to finally have like a pro team. Like I've been to states and in areas too where it's like it could be hours away for you to go to like any type of professional event. So like you said, right? Like when you're in a small town, like your town or your college, like that is your weekly events because there's
Mhm.
nowhere else you're gonna go for several hours that you could get to anything. So it's like, yeah, the town is very rich. Everyone's really investing in there because that's probably the main thing and the main option that you can do.
Mhm.
It's definitely pretty cool. I know Dave and the fact that he was there from the beginning and he came back again, and just what he's been able to do at that university, from strength and conditioning and obviously from a nutrition standpoint is awesome. I know he's definitely a pioneer in the sport, and he's definitely done a lot
Mhm.
of stuff for dietitians across
Yeah.
the country. So
It
it's
is crazy that just the tradition of strength and conditioning and nutrition, I think those disciplines have a lot of history, obviously in the Big Ten in general, but here at Nebraska, it's just really cool to see like some of those original people that were here back in the 90s when you couldn't really do too much and just how they've really grown and expanded the resources available and stressed the importance of it. And I think that's huge with the training table and everything that we've been able to do here. So
well,
there's a lot of resources.
the pride his house from the 90s, like they just he made it a precedent and they just knew that it was important. So then it just continues on, like whoever takes those positions beyond that, the staff knows that that's a critical role versus, some people that are fighting like just to get a training table or show them that it is important to have. Nebraska was just so far ahead of the curve than most people, which again, back then is why they were super successful in a lot of ways.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
so to get into your role, I mean, this is a little bit different. So, I mean, I guess kind of explain. So, nutrition education and allergen specialist, like, what does that mean? What does that entail? How do you incorporate that either into the training table or providing certain services for the athletes?
Hmm. Yeah. So it's definitely a unique position. And when I first got the call about it, I was like intrigued, kind of confused, because especially coming from being a director of football nutrition, like that in and of itself is a huge role. And like the education and allergen component and even food service is such a small part of any dietitian's job that I was like, this is very intriguing to be able to kind of like define what that looks like, I guess. And I definitely think now that training tables and there's not necessarily much regulation on meals that can be provided in the college setting, this is an important position to be able to do it correctly, to be able to be smart. And if you're within a certain financial standpoint within your institution, like this is big too. It's really great for recruiting, which is something that with NIL and just the way that student athletes are being treated now, that's just a huge thing. And then also like nutrition information is everywhere and it's really hard to know what is right, what is wrong, what's misinformation, disinformation. So I think having an in-house specialist who is a sport dietitian first and foremost is really, really helpful to be able to kind of again take your resources a step further. So We're still kind of defining it. Like it's really only been half a year, one semester, and we had a new football staff, a new football dietitian, and her whole crew basically started during camp. So football is what kind of drives a lot of our menu at the moment, just because it is such a big amount of people that you're serving. So this first semester was a lot of trial and error. And another part of this role is with Notemeal. So we are using that app for a lot of education and just again as a resource that we can provide our student athletes. So since it was again middle of football season, middle of soccer and some of the volleyball too, we really wanted to kind of see what we were going to use it for and then refine it in the postseason. So this next semester is going to be big and kind of defining standards of operation and standards of practice for how our dietitians are going to use those resources. But yeah, the allergen specialist part, that's been fun to navigate. We serve 3 meals a day at Nebraska. So breakfast, lunch, and dinner. We are creating like a labeling system for our allergens. So we have the top 9 allergens are listed on every single food item because there are a lot of hidden ingredients in food. So just to be able to know that what you're eating contains whatever it does contain, just based on our recipes at the training table. So overseeing that and the labeling, making sure our staff is aware too. So a lot of education is for student athletes, but also for our staff. So whether it's our culinary crew or our front of house students, or maybe some of our nutrition students that work at our fueling stations, just educating them on what the allergies in our products are, what student athletes have different allergens or intolerances for, and making sure that we're following the right standards of practice and keeping everyone safe and healthy. And there have been instances in the past, both at Iowa State and at Nebraska, where obviously something is overlooked and exposure happens, and that's what you don't want. So this position exists for a reason, and it's been really fun to define it along the way. Education, I think Nebraska, like you said before, had a great foundation for education. So every dietitian is encouraged to, come up with their own team talks and handouts and whatever that may be. But I think the role within this position is kind of to bring that to life and create maybe more so kind of structure and curriculum, whether it's cooking classes or cooking demos in the training table or grocery store tours or whatever that looks like, or even just kind of creating more, like bringing it to life a little bit more so that if our dietitians go somewhere else, we still have a really good foundation and platform here to grow upon for our student athletes.
And that way you can just streamline it. I mean, again, everyone's going to put their own touch on it. Every practitioner is going to have their own personality and having the ability to connect with the athletes and the coaches. But at least if everyone's speaking the same language across the board, it makes it a lot easier. So then you're not having these miscommunications or one dietitian saying this, another dietitian saying this. It's just like, hey, across the board, here's our curriculum, here's how we're going to progress it, here's what you're going to do or you could do with your specific sport. But like here's kind of our base that we're going to for sure have always. And then however we go off from that, then we can essentially go off from that. But I think that's essential, right? You need to have that baseline. I kind of call it the basement. So,
Mhm.
to develop the basement first. And if you can have the education portion, and then the big thing I think, a lot of dietitians try to do if they have the ability to do it is the application. We can teach these athletes all we want and provide them as much information as we want. But if we're not truly providing the environment or showing them how to utilize it in the environment, that's going to be where the big challenges come. And that's where you see sometimes where they go to another school or they go to the pros and you still got a guy, his only meal during the day or girl, only meal during the day is dinner. And you're like, well, you just spent 4 years at this school. What did you learn? Well, I learned a lot. I just don't know how to do anything with it.
Mhm.
It's like, are we really doing the best that we can do? But if I teach you what a carb is, and then you go to a grocery store tour, and then you go to visually see what the actual carb options are, and then now you go into the cooking demonstration, now you're cooking the carbohydrates, you just have that really nice progression from start to finish to show them how that needs to work. And boom, now you developed a skill and behavior that they can not only use now as an athlete, but that's going to provide them the help for when they go into the future for themselves, their friends, their family, their parents. It just extends out so much more than just the brief period of time that you get with them.
Yeah, I think teaching the man to fish is like the big thing, like giving them those life skills. And I've seen it in football and I've seen it in Olympic sports, but they have so many resources available to them that when they go off into the real world, they maybe don't have the skills that a normal college person would have attained when they were on their own roughing it for the first time. Or like mom and dad did so much for them beforehand. If they go somewhere for college that doesn't have resources, they're still struggling to meet their needs, and they're doing so much more for their sport that they don't really realize how much their needs go up. So I think that basement is a good way to put it, in just a sense of what resources can you provide to them to be able to give them these skills, whether it's doing cooking classes or making it like a fun team competition, or if you have a coach and a staff that really values that too, like how can they be promoting your services too, or like just making it fun and making it realistic for the athlete too, because they have so many things that they're being required to do, not only for sport, but for school academically too.
Yes.
So making it fit in their schedule is a big thing.
And they want something they like you said, fun multiple times. They want something that they're just going to enjoy with their friends, with their teammates, and cooking can, and again, I always say cooking, sleeping, and hydrating are never going to go anywhere anytime soon, or just fueling in general. You got to do them every single day. So why not find a way where it's going to be enjoyable and fun instead of a task? It sucks. I don't like to do it. Let's just have a really positive reinforcement, a positive notation around it. When you can make something competitive, and when there's
That's
food
big.
involved, which everybody, I would hope everybody in general likes food, it definitely makes those conversations much more easier when you're putting those things into place for sure.
hmm
So, to go back to the allergen part, obviously you're going to be sticking on labeling and you're going to have that available like in the training table. But what do you do when somebody has an allergy? Like, how do you communicate that to the chefs? Do you guys do allergen testing? As a practitioner myself, I've heard a variety of kind of a 50-50 response. Don't do allergen testing. It sucks. It doesn't work. Yeah, do allergen testing so we can at least find like if some stuff bothers them, maybe we got to do an elimination diet and figure out what's actually causing some symptoms or an inflammation, and it could be impairing their GI symptoms and GI upset. Maybe what is your opinion, or are you guys looking at possibly trying to do that maybe more dietitians could look at as an opportunity for them to integrate?
Yeah, for sure. It's a great question, and I wish I had like the exact answer for you to solve that problem. But and I think that's another thing too. Like we're during it in a time of transition, and we're kind of moving, improving our medical model a little bit too. So currently, we do not. I personally, at least myself, do not do any kind of allergy testing. We leave that with the physicians. It's really the responsibility of the athletic trainers to be able to communicate that information of any food allergies that have been disclosed by the student athletes, and taking it upon the student athletes themselves to be able to let us know if they have a true allergy or intolerance, which for the most part, they're going to be good about doing that, whether they carry an EpiPen or if it's that kind of severity, just knowing that we have that information on hand from our medical team, so the team physicians and athletic trainers for the most part. And that's where it becomes really important to have our like electronic medical records and to have regular performance meetings so that we are aware of this information, because it can slip through the cracks if like a trainer maybe doesn't think that like an intolerance or anything like that is super important, but it does become important when it comes to fueling on the road, or maybe going to trigger someone. So I think that's very important information that needs to be disseminated amongst the performance team. Um, so that's kind of the biggest thing. We rely on the trainers to tell the dietitians, and then the dietitians, when I first started, they had a whole list of things. Football did a really great job too of having their people. Just I think football is such a different beast because they're ingrained so much day to day. So I work really closely with Kristen and her football staff just to make sure that their needs are being met too. Um, but then I'll work with our culinary crew and we'll review the menus together, make sure that any of the maybe foods that are an allergen risk are um, controlled, and we eliminate that risk of any kind of cross contact, which is allergen foods getting exposed or intermixed with non-allergen foods. So just always making sure that we have plenty of options, whether it is a specific food or maybe an intolerance that someone could have too. So we label all that. We really work hard on our menu development that we have options. And if it is like a special circumstance, like a pregame meal or something, we'll make sure that we accommodate whatever athlete it is. And I think that's the big thing too behind this role is making sure that those student athletes that maybe do have more severe allergies feel like they can come and eat and be a normal person and not have to eat the same like rice and plain chicken day to
Yeah,
day. Like,
it's like I have this allergy. It's like, oh, they're just gonna feed me the same thing every day, and it's just, and then you're not too motivated to want to come in, and you're kind of like, I'll just go buy my own food, and then it's like now we're not able to include the individual in the way in the manner that we want to. Which if you lose that person and other people have allergies, they're just gonna tell us other people like, they're not gonna be able to do anything for you. Versus, no, we have 3 or 4 options that are all gonna work and still meet your needs, and
and
just give
tastes
you
good.
variety.
Yeah, and you don't have to be afraid, and that doesn't have to be a source of anxiety for you or whatever it may be. And there have been other instances too where maybe it's not necessarily like a true allergy, but it's someone who, like a baseball player or someone who's been losing weight throughout the fall. Like, is it something that is food related? So, or maybe it's a softball player or something like that who's been having some kind of GI distress. So, working with that dietitian and just having another set of like another head that you can bump ideas off of and be able to talk to that athlete and find out what like a root cause could be for that situation and address it in the off season or whenever you can, just so that they don't have to struggle and be afraid to eat when that's not going to help their situation or help them reach their goals when it comes time for season two.
And I think the other practitioner that's super helpful is just mental conditioning, sports psychologists. A lot of time, especially you talk about appetite a lot, you talk about energy a lot. A lot of these keywords, things that we see that are up and down constantly throughout a season. Based on how the season's going, their relationships with different people that are around them, whether it's obviously classwork, like nothing's a straight line or nothing's like this perfect line progressing the way we want. It's always this kind of like roller coaster at times. And we have those other people we can fall back on to give us feedback.
Mhm.
I mean, I found, especially the last 5, 6 years, having those people around makes those conversations a lot easier to know, when I can push a little bit, when I need to ease back a little bit. Hey, this person's stressed. When they're stressed, like they don't want to eat or they want to overeat, which, could be some disordered eating there. So it's super
Mhm.
interesting getting their insight to integrate with what we do on a regular basis.
Yeah, that gut brain access is like such a real thing when it comes to sport, especially when you have these like very driven individuals, maybe perfectionistic, and it is impacting their performance. And just again, getting that feedback from coaches or strength and psych, like everyone works together with it. And there are circumstances when the food becomes a big part.
One question I had, because I've used Notemeal in the past. I currently use Notemeal where I'm at right now. That may be useful. You're already doing it, or maybe you will do it in the future. It's just I know they have like that likes and dislikes option where it like pops up red or that it pops
Mhm.
up green. I feel like that could be something really cool to track if you have enough athletes that are willing to input that information that you could like put into menu development. It's like, all right, if I don't know, 20% of the athletes have a lactose intolerance, or 20% of the athletes don't like, I don't know, Brussels sprouts or something, but they
Mhm.
like green beans and broccoli. It could be super cool to like track that to help provide you guys some more feedback from the athletes on menu development. Is that something you guys do or looking into, or?
For the most part, yeah. So Notemeal is something that Nebraska just started utilizing again last summer too. So, and we do have the performance kitchen side of things and the dietitian platform. So the from the performance kitchen side of things, that likes and dislikes is huge. And I do think that'll really help with menu development as we move forward. And we're moving into a new training table next year too. So I think as we streamline our menu with what resources we have available there, that'll be super helpful. I really wish that the likes and dislikes had the third category of like true allergy or something like
Yeah.
that, just so like medically you could be accurate there. Cause right now we just put our allergies in the dislike. So like I haven't necessarily had any issues with athletes yet, but that could trigger if it's a dislike versus something that's gonna potentially be harmful to them. But yeah, just hearing like what foods they do like or don't like, it that is a very useful tool. And we didn't have Notemeal at Iowa State, so it's been like a little bit of a learning curve for me too, just to get used to the platform. But over the past semester, one of our goals has been to get all of our recipes into Notemeal, so that way an athlete's eating there 3 times a day from pretty much Monday through Thursday and 2 meals on Friday. So it's similar to a MyFitnessPal in a sense of we have all of the macronutrients on our in our database that they can log, or a dietitian can put together a meal plan for them, and then they don't have to do any of the guesswork in counting anything or thinking about what to put on their plate, because those suggestions are given to them by the dietitian. And they don't necessarily see numbers of calories or anything like that. They can just see like a bar graph or a pie chart kind of, and I'm this close to meeting my protein, or, I need to hit my carb goal for today in order to be able to practice tomorrow, or whatever that looks like. So it's a very useful tool. I know some dietitians can spend a lot of times on meal plans, and I didn't always necessarily have the time for that in my previous role. So to be able to have this tool is super helpful. And that's been a fun thing that we've been working on for football for the off season, is kind of building those templates. So that way, when they get their lift groups and everything, they can just go from there with whatever their nutrition plan is going to be.
Yeah, I feel those diabetic exchanges are huge because a lot of times people just they don't get calories. But when you can tell them like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, you need 3 carb choices, and they see the serving size, or just like, oh, I need to eat 1.5 bagels, they're like, oh, that's easy to do. Or just take a picture of it and then you can respond back like in the app. Or I mean, even if
Mm-hmm.
it just gets them to take pictures and they even text you, like regardless, it's getting them to make a better decision and hopefully think about what they're doing overall. I
Mm-hmm.
like the kind of the options they've added with like the grocery shopping option, because like you got the recipes in there. Well, now I know what foods I need to get. I put that in my grocery cart. Now I can bring that to the grocery. So it's just
It
kind of a
makes the
seamless
list for you.
transition. Yeah, it's just doing it all for you, which again, it's the land of conveniency here in the United States. And they're busy, right? When they're doing stuff for 10 to 16 hours a day, just like we are as practitioners, the more efficient we can be and the easier we can make stuff for us, makes our life easier and makes us actually want to be able to consistently keep doing it. I think that's the tough thing. If something's not easy and quick and efficient and in line with our schedule, it definitely makes it a lot more challenging for us to want to keep up with if we've got to do too many steps, too many clicks, too many tasks.
Mm-hmm. Especially from a technology standpoint, like there's so many apps and things that these student athletes have, like in order to streamline it, like Notemeal connects with Teamworks and everything. So it's kind of like a one-stop shop for them. Their schedule can sync, so it makes it super easy for both the dietitian and the athlete.
Yeah, the fact you can stick your meals and snacks like on your schedule. And that's another big thing I've done with clients, I've done with athletes. Like a lot of times I just start with schedule and routine. I don't even talk about food. Like even before I even talk about food, I might even talk about sleep. Like if
Mm-hmm.
your schedule, your routine, and your sleep isn't good, you're probably not going to be really making good decisions going into the following day. Everyone says, oh, you want to start your day with a good breakfast. Well, how are you going to start your day with a good breakfast if you got 6 hours of sleep and you didn't even think about or plan what your day is going to even look like going to the next day?
Mm-hmm.
Athletes say they're stressed, they're rushed. You see athletes running across the campus to get to a film session or a weight room session. And a lot of it comes down to just they don't have those skills in place to be able to do that. And once you can teach them that and show them how to fit the little pieces into their day and show them how to like carve out time and transition time, then yeah, like they'll be able to understand how to apply a lot of the stuff that you're telling them. But like until you can provide those options to them, they're just not going to know. I mean, some parents will teach them. Some parents don't have the opportunity to teach them because depending on the environment they come from, low economic, middle, high economic, it's just you're getting a mixed bag. So that's why you got to be able to be flexible and you got to know how to curtail your information to each person for sure.
Mm-hmm. And knowing how everyone's going to learn and react to that is big.
Yeah. So you talked about, your nutrition education. What is your kind of, I always like to ask this question when they talk about educating the athletes, like what is your goal and your progression of your education? A lot of times I've had this coming into programs. You got an athlete, I know with football now with the free agency, if you want to call it, you get, all sorts of different athletes all the time now. But let's say you got an athlete that's there 2, 3, 4 years, right? And they already know about hydration that you talk to them about as a freshman. Is
Mm-hmm.
there any way you like delineate the education? Is there any way where you progress the education so that way like that person that's coming in from year 1 to year 3 and 4 is getting something advanced or different and not just getting thrown into the same thing you've been taught like 4 years in a row.
Yeah, no, I think that's huge. And it kind of goes back to what you're saying too. Like when a kid comes from high school, they're in a variety of different places in their life. Like some people know what a carb is, some people have no idea. They don't know the difference between a carrot and a sweet potato, you know? So again, meeting them where they're at, and it helps to kind of be in some of those performance meetings of like knowing a kid's background a little bit more maybe before going into it. And so that way when you meet them, you have an idea of where they're kind of coming from and what coach's goal might be for them.
Mm.
And then you hear what the athlete's goal is for themselves, and being able to kind of piece the pieces of the puzzle together to really help that athlete meet them where they're at, get to know their learning style and how they like to communicate. And I think back at Iowa State, we did a really good job with kind of separating them with the incoming freshmen or maybe the transfers, and then like sophomore, junior, senior. So you could meet with them at different times based on where they're at in what we called them their storm program. But I think that's really helpful. But also hearing the same message over and over is beneficial too, because maybe when they were a freshman, they weren't necessarily in a place where they were ready to hear that message, or they couldn't like put it into practice yet. But then by the time they've heard it as a junior or maybe a senior, then they hear it again and they're like, oh yeah, that's really true. Like I can remember sophomore year after a game, I felt like shit. And it was probably because I didn't eat anything before that game or whatever it was. So I think just it's okay to hear that same message over and over, but then in one-on-one meetings, you can get a little bit more granular maybe as they progress in the program or the longer you work with them, just to be able to really refine their goals and their plan. And they're going to grow and develop within those time too. So their goals are going to change, or maybe they will have different roles within the team. They're going from a maybe fourth string to a starter. So that's going to look different, or maybe they get injured, or just things happen along your college career that changes your trajectory. So I think just having that really strong, solid foundational relationship is key in order to make any kind of impact as they go along in the program.
And I like what you said there. You took everyone's feedback, coaches, athletes, probably your sports medicine staff, and probably just, again, having a conversation with those individuals that you have relationships with. They're probably going to give you some themes, semester, every year, what the team is trying to do this year. And you're going to have a good idea of like, all right, what are my top three, even probably like possibly topics that I need to talk about. Like everyone's getting poor sleep. Well, how do I integrate ways to help with maybe even the sports psychologist? How do we do like a team talk together or something where we can work together to like get these guys better ways to, parasympathetically calm down? What are good foods to eat before bed? Or maybe guys have trouble with like pre-activity fueling
Mm-hmm.
and they don't know what to eat. It's just like, all right, here are my three big mainstays. Like I need to include this with basketball, but football wants this. So I
And it's
definitely,
huge to talk with your team, like do those team talks in the weight room or do those team talks in the training room when during a rehab or whatever. Like, because then it shows the athletes that you're working really hard with strength and conditioning and you guys are a team together. You're working with the trainers, you're not in your own little silo. Like, I think that's the biggest thing of getting out of your office is huge and talking to those other professionals, because if you're just staying in your own little box, like no one's going to be able to really be able to stand up for you when you're not around. And that way you guys are all consistent with your messaging, and the athletes see how invested you are in every single part of their development too. So just again, it like nutrition ties into everything. You're doing it before you work out, you're doing it between classes, like just showing face and working with those other interdisciplinary professionals is big too.
and the more you can show your face, like you said,
Mhm.
practice, training table. When you see them walk into class, you're just saying, hey, like the more exposures you can get throughout the day, like the more chances they're probably going to ask you a question. Versus,
Mhm.
oh, I work with three sports and I just go see softball on Tuesdays in the afternoon. Like they just know, like, they're not really here when I need them. Like they're just going to show up for like 30 minutes on Tuesday to see
Mhm.
when they're gonna supposed to come. And it's just like you can't build anything if you're not there and around and available for them. It just makes it super challenging, and they're not going to have that trust to be able to go up to you and want to ask you something because they don't know if you're going to be there or not be there from week to week, which is the tough part.
Be a grind.
So one thing I want to finish up on, if you were to give one piece of advice, which I know is really challenging, one piece of advice to a dietitian that's transitioning into a new position, what would that be?
I think being really realistic with your goals and values. And I think that was really hard for me and something I didn't even really like touch on. But so in my second season, I had a baby. So that was something that I had seen a lot of coaches and staff sacrifice a lot of that time and just be away from their kids. And I think Amy Bragg said it in the football symposium this year at CPSDA that like, and this is Alabama's football dietitian. So her literally it came out of nowhere. And she said her one regret was that she didn't spend more time with her kids when they were younger. So that really hit me hard. It was at a time when I like didn't want to leave football, but I had this lovely baby. And I think just being true to like what you want as a person, but also your career goals, they can work hand in hand, but your job doesn't have to define you. So I think being okay with moving on to something different, it opens the door for someone else who is ready for that step. And you have the ability to kind of make your position what you want to make it. So again, I wanted to stay in athletics. I needed a little bit more maybe family time. So this position opened at a perfect time and it was in a place that was closer to home and I knew it was a rich department in general. So being open to change and embracing those maybe unknowns and knowing that you have to just be upfront with yourself in those conversations when you're interviewing and knowing what to expect when it comes to a job and trusting that you're going to be around good people who want to support you and help you with your own goals too.
And I'll leave it with this. There's endless games. There's never gonna like football is
Yes,
never
sure.
gonna stop. Basketball is never gonna stop. Like, sports aren't gonna stop anytime soon, but you're never gonna get back time with your family and you're never gonna get back time with your kids if you don't prioritize and make that important. And if you don't have a department that's willing to allow you to go do those things, then that's probably the first question. One of the questions you should ask your interview process. And if that's not a priority to them, then they're probably not the department or organization you need to be with because they probably don't spend time with their families. And if they don't,
Mm-hmm.
then that means they're not family oriented, and that's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to be running on the ground and miss your kids' games, miss your kids, first birthday, whatever that is. Like that's times you're never going to get back.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's so true. That's a big lesson that I think is hard to learn for a lot of people, but it's
But that's
true.
why we're doing this podcast. We're spreading that wisdom. We're getting it out to people so that hopefully more young dietitians that are listening to this, they can get this information ahead of time, and then hopefully make the best decisions.
And know that positions like this can exist and provide a lot of value to the student athletes and be realistic within the grind because I know we've all done it. We all work the 70, 80-hour weeks, but it's time to
Yep.
delegate at times.
It comes down to us to be able to make that shift, as a group of dietitians. But Rachel, really appreciate having you on. If anyone wants to listen to more of the Roost podcast, you could listen to it on Spotify and also Apple Podcasts. We have over 60 episodes right now of a variety of different practitioners, strength, athletic training, physical therapy, nutrition, you name it, we got it. If you guys are looking for discounts on Thorn or Design for Sports, we also have that as well. Rachel, hope you have a terrific day.
Thank you, Sean. Thanks for everything you're doing.